A child's death that has haunted the town of Pekin for the past year.
On November 18th, 13-year-old Robert B. was reported as a runaway by his mother.
However, we have been in touch with the Illinois State Police and are in the process of entering information of a missing or endangered person advisory.
And what happened to Robert B. brought people in Pekin out to search for answers themselves weekend after weekend. Thousands of leads poured into the Pekin Police Department.
The search for the teenager coming to a halt on a hot July day when his skeletal remains were found.
So in the first episode, I think we gave an overview of the case and some pieces of it here and there, some of the things we want to really look into. But really, I think we need to go back to the start of this case and really kind of see how our journey began, because I think that will help people understand how we've gotten to some of the conclusions we have. So I think for Tuesday, I think the main goal is I definitely want to get a tour of the house, or where the house is at least, and where he was. I think that will tell us a lot. Like, is it some weird highway where there's cornfields and then all of a sudden
there's no reason, like, there's no way for him to get here,
right,
or something like that? Or is the guy who's owned the field owned it for the last 40 years and it's just like, yeah, kids are always hanging out in these woods.
Yeah, right?
I'm very curious to see what happens to certain parts of the story as we talk to slightly more serious characters.
Yeah.
So, like the email that you got from the reporter that was handling the stories.
There's probably a thing too, which I could imagine if you've been researching this and trying your own and you're doing your reporter thing, like, I'm nobody, I'm from out of town, like, oh, I'm gonna come in here and fix it? Like, I'm sure there's gotta be like, who the fuck are you kind of a mentality.
A little bit. Coming from an old school journalist mentality, people probably don't know his stance on it.
Yeah, that's true.
Because
as just giving facts.
As a reporter, he can't give his stance. He's just trying to reiterate information as best as possible.
Right.
So I can see that this is something where he's potentially a little nervous.
Yeah.
Because he could suddenly come out and say like, oh yeah, no, like, I'm pretty sure it was X. And then that brings about some form of retribution.
Absolutely.
Pekin is a good city. It has its poor element, but it has strong middle class, some very good neighborhoods. It does have southern nature to it in terms of the demographics and how the city filled with immigrants from the South, Kentucky,
yeah,
Tennessee, that was then followed by elements from New England and the East during the 1800s and into the 1850s, a lot of German people emigrated here.
Mm-hmm.
So it still has a southern flavor to it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of typical of Illinois. It has a unfortunately strong and persistent problem with methamphetamine.
It's a county seat, so you have a population of people who are low income. Mm-hmm. You know, people of that nature are attracted to that type of community because they can get their services here. Mm-hmm. A lot of them don't have cars. They don't have the ability to get to Peoria for those type of services. So they have public housing where they can get a decent place to live.
So when did you first hear about the Robert B. case?
November 18th, 2016, I believe it was, when Robert's mother, Lisa, filed a missing person report when he did not return, he ran Thursday. She was cited for truancy that day, when the truant officer and a police officer showed up in mid-afternoon at their small house on Sapp Street, and he ran. And the next day, the truant officer, when Robert didn't show up at school, Wilson School, where he was in 6th grade, at the age of 13, she filed a missing person report. And the police, I don't know if they, Robert had a history of truancy. I thought something was unusual right off. They issued a statement saying, you know, there's a missing boy. And it's not that they don't do that with other missing kids, but this one just seemed to stand out. I could tell just by talking to the public information officer, there was a little bit more of a urgency to this one.
I think going into the Lisa interview was a challenge because on one hand, I'm very new to the case and all I had done was read on the Facebook groups and stuff I had seen online, and everyone seems to kind of be pointing a finger at Lisa. So I really had to go into this interview and kind of put all that behind me and go in as if I was interviewing someone completely blindly, as if I had not read all those comments, because I wanted to get her version of what had happened, and I think that's really important to understand. When I'm interviewing people, I want their version or interpretation of what happened, and I really try not to allow what everybody's saying and what's being posted to really seep into my subconscious. I try to just put that all to the side so I can interview them on kind of a level playing field.
I am trying to dispel a lot of my kind of clung to assumptions. And just look at this as another mom who has lost a son in a really, really tragic way.
I think the anxiety's setting in a little.
Yeah? Your nerves a little up?
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about Bonzai, like who he was and what made him special, or what things you kind of shared with him?
Oh, he was full of life. He was energetic and he got along with everybody. There wasn't a person that he didn't get along with. He started hanging out with kids that were too old for him.
Yeah.
You know, here he is 13 and you got 16, 17-year-old kids that want to hang out with a little 13-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And they were putting stuff in his head, trying to teach him things that he didn't need to be taught.
Yeah.
You
Absolutely.
know? And then when I get kept in the dark about who he's hanging with and everything else, then it puts me at a loss because I don't know what's going on.
Oh, absolutely. Right. Yeah, that's frustrating as a parent because you just want to know where your kid is and what's happening. And
yeah.
Yeah.
Because he was hanging out with this one boy and I didn't know he was hanging out with this kid, and here I'm driving back from the store and he's hanging out with this kid and there's smoking weed going down the alley, and I'm like, oh no.
Oh no.
I slammed the car in park.
Yeah.
Jerked him up, put him in the car, and I was like, nope, we're gone.
One of the things I think is really interesting in this case is the family dynamic. Stephanie is Bonzai's sister, and Stephanie and Bonzai obviously have a very distinct age gap. You know, you don't usually see that level of an age gap in siblings. And so I think one thing that's interesting here is that Lisa, Bonzai's mother, is actually younger than Stephanie, who is Bonzai's sister. And then Stephanie has a daughter named Kira, who we also spoke with, who's about the same age as Bonzai, but yet Bonzai is her uncle and she is his niece. So sometimes they're almost referred to as brother and sister, even though Kira and Bonzai are not. It is Stephanie and Bonzai who are siblings, and then Kira is Stephanie's daughter. So I just wanted to kind of clear that up in case it's confusing anybody else.
When he was down the street at her cousin's house and we went down and got him, he told me that his mom was letting him drink and smoke dope.
Wow.
Anything else? I don't know.
Yeah.
And he also told me that his mom was taking his prescription medication.
Well, there is a park like right in that neighborhood, and there's like basketball courts and I just remember one time I was down there with one of my friends. Robert was sitting there like at the picnic table with his mom, and we were just talking, and he told me, he was like, yeah, my mom's let me smoke weed before, like if I get headaches or something, and she was just sitting there and like was a mute, like said absolutely nothing.
Wow, so didn't even stand up and be like, well, that's not true, or don't say that.
Yeah, like just said absolutely nothing, like was just sitting there.
And I'm like, who's this kid? And he's like, oh, it's so-and-so. Well, how long have you been hanging out with him? Well, for a while, Mom.
Oh, wow.
He's like, when I tell you I'm going to this person's house, I actually go to his house.
Oh, wow. So that must have been upsetting to hear.
Yeah, to think I send him over to one place and he goes to a second place.
And he sounds like he was kind of an independent soul there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did he ever run away or stay away for a couple days?
Oh, no.
No, okay.
He was Mama's boy.
Oh, okay.
So wherever I went, he went.
Oh, okay. So
he was like, even at the house, if I got up to go to the kitchen, he would follow me and he'd go, where you going? I'm going to the kitchen.
You're like, can I go to the kitchen?
And he'd go, why? Where you going? And he would follow me.
Yeah.
Throughout the whole house.
Yeah.
And I'd have to tell him, you don't need to follow me throughout the house. I'm not going nowhere.
I think it's really interesting that we hear Lisa claim that Bonzai never went missing and never was a runaway, because I feel like we keep getting contradictory stories to that, sometimes from people who were family or friends, and other people who didn't even seem to know her seem to have their own versions of seeing Bonzai in a state where he was either running away or not wanting to go home for the night. I even got a message on Facebook from a woman who worked at the nursing home that Robert B. Sr., where he was at. And she said, this was after the first episode aired, that she'd personally like to thank us for looking into this case. So I think it's really interesting because she says that he used to ride his bike from Pekin to Morton, and keep in mind, that's not a short distance. I mean, you're talking about 10, 15 miles. And then she goes on to basically say that Bonzai would stay with his father at the nursing home, which I thought was weird because I felt like nursing homes didn't usually allow guests. So I asked her to elaborate on this, if this was a common practice to allow someone to spend the night. So she says Robert B. Sr. was legally blind, so he stayed at the nursing home in Morton. Even though him and Lisa were married, because the house was not safe enough for Robert Sr. to live. So when Robert Jr. would find a way sometimes, there would be multiple times that we would allow him to stay at the nursing home with his dad because he didn't want to go home, and the police went there multiple times to pick up Jr. because his mom called and said he had run away.
He always would call us, be like, can you come get me? Like, I don't want to be here. Like, come get us. So we'd always go and get him.
So your family was kind of like the go-to for him, a safe place.
Yeah, he was always with us.
So can you tell us a little bit about the days leading up and then to the day? So I'm talking about kind of from the 16th on, just so that people, because I feel like there's a lot of conjecture. I'm sure you see this with the social media sites and everything. I feel like there's a lot of
a lot of negativity, a lot of
negativity, and
people don't know what happened, so they're speculating on what they want it to say or whatever.
Let's put the timeline to bed then. So on the night of the 16th, so this is 2 days before he went missing, he stayed at Christopher Butt's house?
Yeah.
And he also stayed at that house on the 17th as well?
Yep.
Okay. And then on the night of the 16th, were you at home or what were you doing?
The night of the 16th, we had went to Peoria. I had stayed there on the night of the 16th and the 17th. So whenever, he'd go there, I would go to Peoria because, I knew where he was at.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you feel he's in a safe spot.
Because I'd call.
Yeah.
Make sure he's there.
Yeah.
So when I call, when I'm told he's there, I don't take their word. I make them put him on the phone.
Oh, okay.
So that's how I always knew he was there, because I never took their word. I'd always ask.
Oh, yeah.
I want to talk to him, because that was my baby. I'm mom of him.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was in Peoria.
And then were you at the same house both the 16th and 17th?
Yeah.
Okay. You were at Patty Adams' house?
Yeah.
Those nights? And it was just friends hanging out kind of at both nights?
Yep.
Okay. So I guess we'll just go back to like, how do you know Lisa originally?
It was that one night. That was the first night I've ever met her. November
crazy.
17th.
Yeah. That was the first time
That was the first night I ever met her. I've ever seen the woman in my life.
Yeah.
I've never met Robert B.
Yeah.
I've seen pictures of him.
Yeah.
That's it. Actually, it wasn't my get-together. It was my nephew's get-together, Mike's.
Okay.
I mean, it was just a handful of people. 5 at the most. I think what was Lisa, my nephew, Savannah, Haley. I said Josh at the time, but come to find out it was not Josh. It was another kid named Aaron.
Oh, okay. Nice. And so it was just basically it wasn't a party at all. It was just a small get-together.
Right. I mean, yeah, they were drinking.
I think one thing that really surprises me in this case is the prevalence of underage drinking and how casually it's talked about. I think both with the drinking and drug use, you hear it quite a bit in this case. And I'm surprised at how acceptable it almost seems, or commonplace. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened on the 17th? Because I know this goes from the 17th into the 18th.
Well, on the 17th, I got a call that morning first it was from truancy officer, said that my son didn't go to school. So I immediately called the Butts' house and asked. And, they said that they watched him walk towards the bus stop.
Okay.
I was like, okay.
And do you know around when the cops originally went there?
All I know is they chased him. It was the police officer, the truancy officer, my son's principal. They chased him on foot, and they lost him on foot.
Okay.
And I asked the cops, I said, how do you lose a 13-year-old boy on foot?
Absolutely.
Especially when there's 3 of you,
right?
And there's only 1 of him. How do you lose him on foot?
Yeah.
And no answers. And I found out not immediately after, but like 3-4 weeks after my son went missing, that he tried to get on the bus on Thursday, but the bus driver wouldn't let him on because he had a big Polar Pop soda and he tried to stuff it under his shirt and get on. It smushed and and it soaked his clothes, so she wouldn't let him on the bus.
Okay. So that was the morning of the 17th. She wouldn't let him on.
And then I got a call from his friend Peter, and he goes, I got Bonzai with me. I'm like, well, what's he doing with you? I said, he's supposed to be at the Butts' house.
Yeah.
I said, take him back over there until I get back. So he ended up walking him back over to the Butts' house and taking him back. I saw that I call again. I said, is he over there now? They said, yeah. I said, do not let him leave until I get home.
Yeah.
And then I will call you when I get home to let him come home.
Yeah.
So when I got back home on Thursday, I called the Butts' house and said, okay, I'm back now. You can let him come home now.
Okay. And so then he came home at that point?
Yeah.
And what time about would you say you got home?
It was probably around 3:30.
Okay. And what time does his bus, do you know what time his bus usually left in the morning?
His bus usually picked him up around 7. We ended up by asking him, I said, why didn't you go to school? He goes, I didn't feel like it. I said, you know you're supposed to go to school every day. Why didn't want to?
Yeah.
So then, probably about 6:30, he goes, Mom, can I stay the night at the Butts' house again? I said, you can only stay again on one condition, that you promise, Mom, that you will go to school on Friday, that you'll go to school for me. And he goes, okay, Mom, I promise. So I told him, I said, you gotta hurry up and get your stuff ready and go. I said, because you got an 8 o'clock curfew, so you gotta be inside by 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
So he hurried up and went back over, and I called to make sure he was there, and he was.
When you talked to him the night of the 17th, do you feel like he Did you guys talk about the fact that if he wasn't going to school on that night too?
Well, I told him, since he didn't go to school on the 17th, I told him, I said, you keep doing this. I said, they're going to revoke your probation. And I told him that. And he looks at me and he goes, before I go to JDC, I'll run.
Yeah. Wow.
So he knew if he kept missing school,
yeah,
they were going to revoke his probation.
Yeah. So then when he went to the Butts house and stayed the night on the 17th, he went over there again, right?
Yep. Because we ended up getting in an argument on the 17th over the phone.
Oh, okay.
Because he called my cell phone at like 11:30 at night.
Oh, wow.
Mom, go buy me a pack of cigarettes. I said, no, I'm not buying you a pack of cigarettes. He goes, fine, I'll call Dad. Dad'll make you buy me a pack of cigarettes. I said, I'm not buying you a pack of cigarettes.
Yeah.
So he started calling me a B word and everything else and cussing me out on the phone. Then he hung up on me. About 5 minutes later, he calls me back and says, Mom, I'm sorry. I love you. And then we did our routine where I would tell him, night, night, sleep tight, don't let the bed bugs bite.
Yeah. Is that something you guys said to each other a lot at night?
Every night before we went to bed, I'd tell him, night, night, sleep tight, don't let the bed bugs bite. And that I love him.
So he was kind of calling to smooth things back over with you, basically.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that was the last time I talked to him.
Yeah. And so and what nights did Lisa stay at your house the night?
She was there that Thursday night. Like I said, she got my house, I want to say 5:30, 6 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what time I would normally fix dinner. We had just got through eating dinner.
Yeah.
So I'm at 6. Could have been a little after 6 or whatnot.
Yeah.
And they were there all night long, up until the next day, up until, I want to say 3.
Yeah.
Because not too long after that, my youngest daughter came home from school.
So to the best of your knowledge, on the 17th, she got there between 5 and 6, and she stayed there until about 3 o'clock on the 18th.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever see any possibility, is there any possibility that Robert ever came into your house that night? One thing we like to do while we're investigating is kind of confirm anything, even if it seems like a detail that everyone's familiar with and has heard over and over again. One of those facts is if Robert spent the night at the Butts house on the night of the 17th. We haven't got a verbal confirmation from the family yet if that is accurate information. We did find this on Facebook, however. That seems to be a confirmation that he was at their house, and obviously the news reports prior to us getting into this said that's where he spent the night. But here's at least a message we saw on Facebook from the Butts family regarding this.
Yes, Robert stayed at my house for 2 nights and got up with my son and was supposed to go to school, but didn't. My son went to school. I didn't even know that Robert didn't go to school on Thursday until police showed to my house looking for him. And then he ran from them and came back here. And I told him if they came back looking for him, I wasn't lying for him. Then Lisa called me that night and said he could stay again if he wanted to. And he did. Then him and my son got up on Friday morning to go to school, and my son went to his bus stop and Robert left to go to his. And again, I didn't know he didn't go to school again until the police and truancy officer came to my door. And I called Lisa and told her, and she said she was on her way home. And they told me to tell her they would meet at her house. And that was the last time I seen Robert. And the police have been back here and asked the same questions and searched my home, and they haven't been back since. So I don't know what people are saying, but I don't know anything else about him.
So can you tell me a little bit about how that next day went, the 18th?
I ended up getting a call again from the truancy officer that he didn't go to school again. So I immediately called the Butts house.
Yeah.
They said, well, we watched him walk towards the bus stop, but they lied to the police. The first time they said that they walked him to his bus stop.
Okay.
Then they flipped their story and changed it and said, oh no, we watched him walk towards that way.
Oh, okay. They didn't see him actually get to it or get on the bus.
Yeah, they didn't see him get on the bus. They didn't see him even get to his bus stop.
And how far was his stop from the Butts' house, would you say? Just a couple blocks, or?
Probably a good, about 5 blocks away.
Okay.
So I knew they couldn't see him physically get on the bus.
Yeah. So your thought is he never got on the bus. Is that what you're thinking, or?
I don't know, because when I got, my front door didn't lock from the outside.
Okay.
Because we didn't have a key because Bonzai lost it. So the only way to lock my house was from the inside. When I got there on that evening, or that afternoon, I got there around 2:30, 3 o'clock.
Okay.
First thing I asked the police, I said, was my front door locked or unlocked?
Yeah.
And they said, it was locked. I said, well, then somebody was in my house. I said, because that door only locks from the inside.
So you knew someone had been there, most likely.
So by the time I got there, it was unlocked. So from the time the cops were there to the time I got there, somebody had got in my house and out before I got there. Because when I got there, there was a bag of clothes was sitting on the floor that he had took with him Thursday night. My mail was scattered all over the floor, and there was a chair with a little stand next to it, and the jar of peanut butter was there with a spoon where it's like he'd been eating peanut butter.
Yeah.
So I knew he had been home. I told him, I said, he was inside. And they said, how do you know he was inside? I said, because his clothes are there. My mail is scattered all over the house, and there's a jar of peanut butter with a spoon where they had peanut butter on it.
Yeah.
He was in there.
Yeah. So you found out via a news report, like actually on TV?
She called right after she did that report.
Oh, wow.
She waited until she did the report and then called and said, is Bonzai with you?
Oh, so she didn't even call ahead. Like, you think that you would have been the first one? If he was missing, I would think you would be the most likely place for him to be.
If he was missing, she would check at the nursing home with Dad, because he went there before.
Yeah.
Or she would check with us.
Wow, and she didn't even say anything.
She didn't check either place.
You know, one can speculate, but the facts are that he did not take his bike. It was an unusually warm day, as I wrote my one-year summary. So he didn't really have, the need at that time for a heavy jacket. He just ran.
Yeah.
Now, where would a kid run to? It's still school hours. Any other friends would be in school. So where did he go? They assume it's a homicide. They've ruled it a homicide. The bottom line is where he was found, where his remains were found, was about 2 miles down a main highway, Route 29, right out there. 2 miles down. I don't know of any reason why Robert B. would walk 2 miles by himself and then sit down in a field and not leave it. Okay, and that, one can make that conclusion. How he got there, nobody knows yet, or maybe somebody does. But as we've discussed, you need solid evidence to take a case to court.
Absolutely.
And after that, no sign of him for what was it, 8 months?
Yeah.
Until he was found. And that's where the case stands.
Yeah.
Again, I spoke with Deputy Chief Don Baxter yesterday, who oversees investigations for the Pekin Department, and he's an open guy. Basically, what he said was, we're on the same spot as we were 6 months ago. We don't have anything new at this time. We're still in a holding pattern, and nothing has changed in the case.
So I came downstairs here because I got a tip, which I just wanted to kind of get on record, that said that Robert was seen 5 days after he went missing. The person gave me a phone number I could call of somebody who had seen him 5 days after. So as soon as tomorrow comes along, I'm going to give this person a call and check out the validity of this. Okay, so this was 2 years ago when Robert disappeared?
Yep, just a few days afterwards, yeah.
You specifically saw him?
Yeah, he was actually walking on the railroad tracks by It's a power company.
Okay.
Same tracks that lead right by where he's found.
And so you told the cops this?
Yep, and the officer who came said, yeah, it's probably not him. He looked around just a minute, and I said, I guarantee it's him. He's out here. And he refused to do it. Now he's probably in Peoria or down at Stanley's. This is a hoax. He's going to turn up. And, yep, he wouldn't look. But then the detectives got a hold of me in January and asked where I seen him, and then they started looking. But, yeah, didn't find him.
You said you saw, it was right at dawn that you saw him?
Right when the sun's coming up, like 6:58, 7 o'clock that morning.
Okay, perfect. And when you saw him, he was just kind of like walking around like nothing was wrong at that point?
Well, he's heading south. Yeah, like the sun was just coming up, and he was downwind of me, and I just heard something. You just, instinct kind of turned around thinking, what the hell is the deer doing behind me downwind of me? And I realized as a kid, what the hell, this is not right.
Yeah.
Watched him go down the track south. Something told me to get out of the deer stand. Something's wrong. Then when I got home, I realized, shit, that's probably that missing kid. And that's when I called. And they would not go out there.
Wow, so that was a couple days after he had been missing, is that right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, like I said, I believe it was a Wednesday. Yeah, but I guarantee the police department's got to have records. If you keep pushing and prodding, yeah, you're going to get somewhere.